Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, I am Dr. Khurram Shehzad and I am teaching you critical discourse analysis, and this is 7th semester evening. In the previous classes we have been discussing about discourse. We have read the definition of discourse, what is meant by discourse. For example, discourse is written or spoken language in relation to its social context. So we have read that how discourse is generated, how it is created, how it is spread, and then how it is made truthful in the society. And what is the role of discourse, okay, that how it affects us, how it affects our behavior, how it affects our knowledge, and how do people, they generate discourse. Then we have read in second chapter the role of discourse with society, that how do these two variables like discourse and society, they interact, because discourse is generated in society. We cannot think of discourse outside the society. Or even in this definition that the critical discourse analysis examines spoken or written discourse and its relationship with its social context. We have read the word context, and context has got different meanings. And we know that context is our society, it is social, it is psychological, okay. And if we remember Dalheim's model of speaking, mnemonic device speaking, where 8 letters, they stand for 8 different elements. So S stands for setting. So setting is the context in which we are interacting. It can be social context, it can be religious context, it can be cultural context, it can be psychological context, it can be physical context, okay, or it is the background knowledge context as well. When I interact with you, I know what is my role. I know that I am a teacher and my relationship with you will be of teacher and a student. When you interact with one another or each other, you know that you are equal, you are at the same level, you both are students. So what kind of language you are supposed to use, how you are supposed to interact. And I know when I am interacting with my family members, how I am supposed to talk. What is my role over there as a brother, how I am supposed to talk. As a teacher, how I am supposed to talk. As a colleague, what kind of language I am supposed to use. What is my relationship with that person, and what is the goal, what is the why we are interacting. So S stands for setting, P stands for participants, the relationship between the participants. Our roles are determined by the situation, because our roles, they keep on changing. Here I am a teacher, outside the classroom I may be a colleague, at home I may be a son, I may be a brother. So our roles, they keep on changing. When our roles, they change, our language changes. When our language changes, our relationship changes. Okay. So discourse and its relationship with the society, we have read it. Later on, when I'll be talking about critical discourse analysis, again this role of society will be discussed in detail, where we will be talking about specifically discourse and ideology, discourse and gender, and such type of issues, discourse and politics, okay. And we will be talking about how these politicians, they make use of discourse, how they spread different kinds of discourses. Today we are being bombarded by the social media every day, okay, and there are so many things, news feeds on your Facebook, and sometimes it is very difficult to find out whether it is a true item or false. And then these days people are discussing that many of the things which are being shared on the social media, they are false. So, but whether something is true or false, it affects us, okay. So we will be talking about in detail later on. Then in our last chapter, we talked about that how discourse, it is generated, it is created, and what kind of role then it has in the society. Our today's lecture is about the difference between spoken and written discourse, or we can rename it kinds of discourse. I have talked about written discourse, spoken discourse. Okay, some people say conversation is a discourse, the difference between text and discourse, and I told you the realization of discourse on a piece of paper is called text. And some people say text and discourse are the same thing. So, in again Dalheim's model, S stands for setting, P stands for participants, E stands for ends, meaning goals. Whenever we interact with the people, we have got some goals and we try to achieve those goals. A stands for communicative acts. Our language is divided into different kinds of acts. Sometimes I am making a promise, sometimes I am giving a threat, sometimes I am just sharing information. So every time I speak, my communicative act is a different kind of act. K stands for key, communicative key, okay, my tone, my behavior, how I am interacting with the people. All these are discussed in communicative key. Then I stands for instrumentality. And when I was discussing instrumentality, we have read that spoken discourse, written discourse, and e-discourse. For example, here in spoken discourse, I am speaking and it is one-way communication, okay? You are not here, I know. And I am speaking and I am talking, okay? I am interacting with you. This can be called a monologue. This can be called a monologue. When more than one person, more than two people, they interact, that is called a dialogue. That is called dialogue. I have talked about e-discourse. E-discourse is our discourse that we see on websites, on internet. So internet makes use of different kinds of technologies, different kinds of things, like you can have visual data, you can have oral discourse, you can have something that you are supposed to read, text is there, plus there can be some of the things, clips that can pop up in front of you and you can click on them and you can listen to them. So this is multimodality, and multimodality is working on the internet, but this is called e-discourse. And these modalities, they have their own roles. We know how to use them, we know how to interact with them with the help of them, okay? So in critical discourse analysis, we examine the use of language in relation to its context. And context can be physical, social, psychological, religious, cultural, all these things. Now we come to chapter number 6.14. The topic is grammatical difference between spoken and written discourse. And this is our today's topic, okay? And a question can come in the paper, for example, about monologue, about dialogue, the differences between them, okay? So in dialogue, we may be sharing information, we may be having just a chit chat, okay, or different kinds of things we do. Then, for example, the characteristics that we will be attributing to spoken discourse or written discourse, okay, again, there are no hard and fast rules. For example, many people say that spoken discourse is spontaneous because we don't know what kind of question is going to come from the other side. And when the question comes, accordingly we are supposed to give the answer. So I have not crammed or remembered the answer that this is what this person is going to ask and this will be my answer. No way. So that is spontaneous, hesitations are there. But at the same time, if we look at our ulemas, when they are delivering their Friday sermons in Friday prayer, so they come well prepared. They know what they are supposed to speak. And the same kind of planning that we do in our written discourse that we are supposed to produce, the planning, in our written discourse, we can see it in our spoken discourse, that is the particular sermon that is being delivered by some scholar. Same is the case when a teacher comes to the classroom prepared, he wants to deliver a lecture, again he or she prepares. He or she may have some slides, he or she may have some notes, and he or she can go through those notes. So these notes are well planned, organized, and then accordingly the person is speaking. So people say that there are differences in spoken and written discourse, and there are people, they will disagree and they will say that there are no hard and fast differences between spoken and written discourse. But let's read how Brian Poltridge has talked about these two different modes of discourse, that is spoken discourse and the written discourse, and what kind of differences he highlights. But remember, when he talks about the reviews given by Halliday, then he also discusses at the end some rebuttals, saying that there are people, they disagree with the point of view which is given by this person. So the very first difference discussed by Brian Poltridge is grammatical intricacy and spoken and written discourse. These days we believe in technology, and there is internet discourse, e-discourse. So corpuses have been created all over the world, and Alhamdulillah, with the help of HEC, Air University has also created a corpus of Pakistani English, of Pakistani students, of Pakistani teachers. Okay, otherwise in the past we used to log on to BNC, that is British National Corpus, or ANC, that is American National Corpus, in order to do research. And these days, books are compiled or prepared or designed from the data which is taken from the corpuses. So corpus is a machine readable text. Corpus is created taking the data from the people when they are interacting, when they are writing, because applied linguistics believes in communicative approach, and it believes that we should take data from the real life situations. These days armchair linguistics has got importance in applied linguistics or in linguistics. Chomsky is called armchair linguist. He used to sit and think, and thinking about the language and producing the structure of the language, and talking about that this is the noun phrase and this is the verb phrase, and how tree diagrams are created, and how in our mind we are creating the language. So Chomsky's era has ended now, and people no more believe in figment of the imagination, that you are creating language from your mind. These days people believe in real language, which is used by the people when they are interacting with one another, by the people when they are really writing a letter or some essay. So these days books are compiled or designed from the real language which is being spoken by the students, by the teachers, by the professors, by the doctors. And now I remember one of the incidents which happened to me. Once I was taking an interview, and some student from FSC she did, and she came to me, and I was taking her interview. She wanted to take admission in our university, and I asked her, have you seen this movie? And immediately she said, sir, it is not seen this movie, it is watched this movie. And I said, yes, you are right. But I said, okay, if you have some time, and once this activity of taking the interviews is over, please come and see me in my office. So I am glad that she came, and then I logged on to BNC, and I put this phrase, see a movie, and it gave me 20 or more than 20 hits of see a movie, which showed that the native speakers, they speak this phrase, that see a movie. And I told that student that look how BNC is guiding us, telling us that in real life people, they speak see a movie. But what happens, in our school system and college system, teachers usually they follow this prescriptive grammarian perspective. But linguistics has changed, and we have got this descriptive perspective of linguistics. So in descriptive perspective of linguistics, we talk about that how language is being used by the people in the society. So I told her very politely that watched a movie is also correct, and it gave me more hits of watched a movie than see a movie, but I told her that see a movie is also correct. So why I told you this example? Because today's discussion, today's topic is based on corpus. Brian Poltridge has discussed grammatical differences between spoken and written discourse, and he brings in the data from the corpus, from Bible. Bible, you know, is very renowned in using corpus and doing research in corpus linguistics. So all these things which are written on page 136 of your book, okay, it discusses the differences between spoken and written discourse, but bringing in the data from the corpus linguistics. So let's read and study, talk about grammatical intricacy. Grammatical intricacy means that in our spoken discourse, usually when I interact with my colleagues, with my family members, with my friends, my sentences are shorter, easier to understand. But when I write, again, having determined that who is the audience, why I am writing, for whom I am writing, I determine the grammatical intricacy of my structures and sentences. For example, Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah Almighty, my new research article has just published, and here I, along with my co-author, we have discussed Allama Iqbal's theory of metaphysics and its relationship with the contemporary world. And particularly those who believe in nihilism, okay, Dadaism, and they say, okay, that we should appreciate them, and we have given the perspective of Allama Muhammad Iqbal. So of course, when we wrote that article, our sentences, they were quite intricate, they were quite long, they were not simple or easy to understand. So when students, they sit to read that article, they will have to spend some time in order to understand that article. So same is the case. For example, this book written by Brian Poltridge, it's easy to understand, but when I ask my students, they say, sir, it's very difficult to understand. So again, determining the grammatical intricacy of spoken and written discourse is not easy. Though some rules have been devised by the people, by the linguists, by the researchers, saying that if one sentence comprises of 20 words or more than 20 words, it becomes very intricate. If it is, you know, having more and more clauses, it is quite intricate, quite difficult to understand. But if it is carrying simple words, it is shorter and easy to understand, then it is simple. So usually people say that spoken language is simple, not as grammatically dense, intricate as written discourse is. But there are people, they will speak against this argument, and they will say, taking into consideration the situation, for example, if you call some very learned professor to come to some university and deliver a lecture on a particular topic, so again, when that professor comes prepared, he knows that how he is going to deliver the lecture and what kind of language he is supposed to speak. So maybe his sentences can be quite difficult at times. So there is no hard and fast rule, but again we will say yes, spoken language is easier to understand as compared to written language. Is that okay? Our next heading that Brian Poltridge discusses is lexical density in spoken and written discourse. So lexical density means words, nouns, adjectives, adverbs. Some of the people, they use quite difficult words in their language. But again, when it comes to writing, we come across new words, we come across difficult words, those words that usually we do not come across when we are interacting in spoken language with someone. Okay, so these things you will find in written discourse quite often as compared to spoken discourse. But again, I will say setting will determine, the topic will determine where you are speaking, that what kind of thing you are discussing. So again, if a professor or let's say some doctor, medical doctor, if he is talking about certain things, okay, I recently came across some very new idea, I can't discuss it here. In simple English we say wrong, something at the wrong place, but medically I came across a word ectopy, which meant wrong. So when I read this word, I was unable to understand at first. Then I tried to look it up in the dictionary, and then I came to know that it just means wrong. So usually in our spoken discourse, it is simpler, it is easier, it will not be having lexical density. Our words will be quite simple, or in spoken discourse we will be using transitions quite often. We will be using prepositions and conjunctions quite often. But when it comes to writing, then of course we think and rethink, we generate and regenerate, we create and recreate, we write and rewrite. We have got time. In spoken language we do not have much time. So we think and rethink, and we embellish our writing, enrich our writing with difficult words. Okay? So this is the second point that Brian Poltridge has discussed in his chapter. The next point that Brian Poltridge discusses is nominalization and grammatical metaphor in written and spoken discourse. And that's very good. One of my supervisees is doing research now on nominalization and grammatical metaphor in written discourse of our students, and I wish I have good feelings about that project that he has taken up. But let us read. Nominalization means that we change the grammatical category of verb usually, and we make it a noun. Let me read. This is also a high level of nominalization. There is also a high level of nominalization in written text. That is where actions and events. So we know that actions are displayed, shown through verbs. So these events and actions, they are turned into nouns. So we will call it nominalization. And you will find this nominalization more and more in written discourse as compared to spoken discourse. Halliday calls this phenomena grammatical metaphor, that is, where a language item is transferred from a more expected grammatical class to another class. So sometimes these verbs are changed into, adjectives, nouns are changed into adjectives, words are changed into adverbs, and the writers, they come to know about the perspective that the writer is taking. Usually we have some other things to find out. For example, active voice and passive voice. I am recording these lectures, and my colleagues who are sitting here, they are also listening to me, and they are laughing that what kind of concepts I am discussing with you. So they don't know me. That sometimes when people come to me for proofreading, and I proofread the works of the scientists, and I come to know that what kind of mistakes they are making in their written work, in their written discourse, what kind of sentences they are writing. So they, when they combine so many clauses and make such a lengthy sentence, and I break them into smaller sentences, and I say make it readable sentence, and something that you are foregrounding. Foregrounding means something that you are putting in the beginning of the sentence. In English we say when something is coming in the beginning of a sentence, it means you are foregrounding that idea. It means that it is important to you. but something which is important for that scientist, the person who is producing that written discourse, he is showing it at the end of the sentence. And I say that this should come in the beginning of the sentence because it is the focus of the sentence. You want to highlight this thing. So they will also understand that from what perspective I am talking about this thing. So in English, we come to know the mind of the person through his writing. We come to know that what kind of discourse he or she is producing, from what perspective he or she is writing. And you know that in class I have given you many examples from the politicians, from the religious scholars, okay. And you know that the book that we follow, Brian Paltridge time and again discusses Barack Obama. He gives the examples, okay, from the British media as well, and how their politicians, they were talking about different kinds of things, and they were creating new kind of phenomena in their country. As we also had the concept of New Pakistan some year ago, okay, and that concept of New Pakistan was created, you know, by some of the people, and now Alhamdulillah we are living in New Pakistan these days. So we are online, we are on the internet, okay, and we are teaching you through this internet. So let's come back to this nominalization. So when these verbs, they are changed into nouns, or when the authors, they change the grammatical category of, you know, words, so that is called nominalization. And this nominalization you will come across more and more in written discourse as compared to spoken discourse. Our next topic under this heading is a continuum of differences between spoken and written discourse. So here he will create a continuum like this, that there is a straight line, okay, and it has got two ends, and these two ends are the extreme ends. So then something is there in the middle. It means that there will be some balanced view of something, that there should be some balanced view, that our, you know, lexical density, nominalization, you can come across these things in spoken discourse as well as in written discourse. So we cannot categorize them saying that only written discourse is like that. Both kind of discourses can be like that. Even e-discourse, if e-discourse is using highly specialized words, technical vocabulary, so that technical vocabulary means that this is not written for me. If I am a language teacher and I want to talk about only, you know, simple English that we usually use in our interactions, or if somebody is talking about medical science, so it will be quite difficult for me to understand. So there has to be a balanced view that these things can come in spoken discourse as well as in written discourse, but usually, you know, people, they talk about that there are differences in spoken and written discourse. And this book discusses 4 differences, but in my own book I have discussed 7 differences. So one of some of the other differences are, I told you, is called spontaneity. So spontaneity meaning that spontaneously you are supposed to give the answer when somebody is asking you a question. Maybe it is an unexpected question that you did not have in your mind that somebody can ask. So then you will have to give a correct answer. Okay, you will have to see. And there are hesitations, of course, in spoken discourse. Sometimes I do not complete one sentence and I start the other sentence. Okay, so that is, you know, there are hesitations, there are repetitions, and there is spontaneity in spoken discourse, and these are the hallmarks of spoken discourse. So now I conclude my lecture saying that we have discussed today nominalization, lexical density, and grammatical intricacy. We have discussed spontaneity, hesitation, and repetition. And on the basis of these things, we differentiate between spoken and written discourse. Plus there is e-discourse. E-discourse is the, you know, social media discourse, internet discourse. It has got its own things. It has got its own platform. It can be textual, it can be visual, there can be some clips that you can just click and you can listen to the people. So it is altogether a different kind of discourse. Then there is monologue. If one person is talking, that is monologue. If two or more than two people are talking, that is dialogue. Okay, so this is how we can divide our discourse into different kinds. Thank you very much. Oof.